Willow, weep for me. Willow, weep for me.
Welcome to a new edition of the Neon Jazz interview series with Kansas City-based painter, social sculptor, and musician Jenna Bauer. Originally from St. Louis, she is firmly a part of the Kansas City jazz scene as a singer. Her visual art is an abstract departure from landscape with an acute focus on color, gesture, and process. Her social practice over the years has included the establishment of arts organizations in South St. Louis and more. These days, she teaches art by day, continues to paint on her own, sings, and makes the Kansas City scene as vibrant as ever. Enjoy her story.
Yeah, Joe Domino, Neon Jazz, thank you for taking a minute out. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
Before we get into your life in music and what's going on, you know, we went through quite a time on planet Earth the last couple of years with COVID, and I'm curious, as a performer, I think, you know, especially musicians went through the ringer in a way that no one else did over this time, and I'm curious, how did you survive it, and how did it change you now that we're coming out of it and things are opening up?
Well, I was actually in the position where I didn't lose a lot of gigs when COVID kicked in. I wasn't gigging a lot at that point in my life. So I unfortunately for me, but I saw so many of my new peers going through that, but I didn't have a lot of things on the books. You know, I was living a different lifestyle of having been a caregiver, and so I was just newly discovering how great it was to sing out at venues and bars and clubs. So luckily I didn't have that absence. You know, I didn't have have those gigs taken away from me. They didn't exist yet. So it was an opportunity for me to begin finding sidewalks to sing on and to bring my collaborators together in that way for the first time instead of having to miss it. And so that's how the quarantine had an effect on me, as far as just kind of it was more of a jumping board to like, people need music, let's get on the sidewalk and start playing. And it was just a downtime for me to start figuring out what I was going to do with my next stage in life.
So speaking of that next stage, now that everything's opening up, what are you doing these days on the scene? How have things kind of, you know, progressed for you?
Well, I used that time to kind of orchestrate a move to Kansas City. So I was able to move from St. Louis to Kansas City during that time, and just start 2 months prior to the pandemic, I lived in Kansas City on a self-made sabbatical. I had really gotten burnt out on teaching. I'm an art teacher. So I spent January and February of 2020 here in Kansas City with the sole purpose of learning about the jazz scene. So I was here, and also to paint every day rather than work as an educator. So I took those 2 months for myself, and I went out every night. A friend shared with me kind of the lineup of all the open jams: Monday at the Blue Room, Tuesday at this place, Wednesday at the Phoenix, and about the Foundation. So I was going out to meet the jazz musicians almost nightly, and during the day I would paint. And then I literally did have a few gigs on the schedule, and one of them was March 11th, and that was back in St. Louis. And so I was scheduled to go back to St. Louis on March 11th, and that was that. That's what got me back to St. Louis. After my gig that evening, I went to the supermarket and got some food because I realized the next day was going to be social distancing, and that's kind of the rest of 2020 for me. Was this intense experience in Kansas City, meeting so many great musicians and friends, and then going back to St. Louis with this experience in the books, but kind of figuring it out from scratch from there, beginning March 12th.
Yeah, that was it. That was quite a time. I remember myself, one of my most indelible memories was a few days before at the Nelson Atkins, Bill Frisell came in, and
the Nelson Atkins.
At the Nelson Atkins, they're in their auditorium.
Uh-huh.
And they have shows there every once in a while. He came in with Petra Hayden and a trio, and it was amazing. Like, I had just gotten married a year before, and I really was baptizing my wife in jazz, and she was like, "What's this show going to be like?" And I simply said, "I have no idea. Like, you just don't know with Bill what he's going to do." But it was amazing. Like, it was eccentric enough where at one point we'd all kind of heard about the first cases of corona, and I don't know if they did this on purpose or not, but they started singing "We Shall Overcome," and Petra stood up and said, "If you want to join me, do it." And everybody slowly stood up like cattle in a field that knew a tornado was coming, and we all swayed in unison and sang it. And then to just kind of be a testament to the eclectic nature of what he does live, we all sit down and he busts into a rendition of Ziggy Stardust. So it was a total pendulum swing, but we all knew somehow that this was going to be the last morsel of live entertainment at that caliber we were going to get for God knows how long. And it was true.
Yeah, the doors were closing for sure.
Yeah, the gates of Mordor were coming in. Were you originally from St. Louis?
Yeah.
Okay. So talk to me a little bit about growing up in St. Louis and kind of your experiences with music and how jazz and singing became your life.
In elementary school, I joined choir, and I remember my choir teacher suggesting to my parents that I look into the St. Louis children's choirs. So I honestly remember that being a big stepping stone for me, learning music theory and solfege and singing in a group and just learning how to project your voice. And I did eventually take private lessons in high school, just maybe for a year, upon my choir director's suggestion. So I took more like classically trained operatic kind of direction of voice lessons. I did end up going to college. I kind of was unclear exactly what I wanted to do, whether it was be an elementary school teacher. I originally went to Indiana University to study choir conducting. I thought I wanted to be a high school choir conductor. But honestly, as I was finding a shortcut on IU's campus to my English class, I discovered visual art. I was cutting through the art department. And so I kind of had a detour from jazz directly by way of visual arts and painting. So I've spent 20 years of my life working through abstraction and landscape painting and process painting. That time that I was in Kansas City for 2 months, I was working on what I call KC Trials, which was a series of grid paintings and gouache. So it's kind of a side of me that is a little bit underexposed, I suppose. I'm here to sing. I love Kansas City's jazz music scene, but the correlation between my visual art and my singing is, to me, very clear with the kind of the fluidity of marks, kind of the purpose of art in general. It's kind of a respite. So with my paintings, I'm hoping to kind of alleviate people's exposure to the politics and the current events and the fashion trends. And I'm hoping that music also, or at least my music, kind of helps alleviate that pressure of the constant grind. My paintings and my music provide kind of a respite for relaxation and just kind of switching gears. You know, some people want to make music that kind of reminds you of important things. The songs I sing are about love and relationships and everyday life, you know, singing and painting and teaching and kind of keeping that an ongoing cycle. And in my own way, I'm a little ADHD and couldn't just do one thing all the time. So singing and the visual arts and the teaching provide me all different ways of kind of approaching the same ideas.
I think, you know, when I look at my life and all of those things and just what you're talking about, you know, I think if you have an id and you have a way that you have to be fulfilled or therapeutically taken care of, I think probably one of the most positive things that you could do is create and to satiate that creativity.
Absolutely. I always would consider my earlier gigs kind of a staycation. It's a departure from daily life to where, as a caregiver for 5 years when I was living in St. Louis, my gigs, that was when I was first starting to play out, was in around 2015, 2016. And my gigs were the lifeboat of life. You know, I knew that I had to be there. Other people in the actual public world were counting on me to be there. They were looking for that, again, that kind of staycation, that relaxation. And so it's not too far to say that music has totally saved my life, looking forward to these gigs and sharing this just those 2 hours or those 3 or 4 hours with an audience is just a total departure from our daily routine, and I'm very thankful for that reason.
My question to you is, as a performer, what was the first live jazz gig you ever saw that made you think, wow, I'd love to do that someday?
That's funny. A friend of mine was going to school. We both met at Indiana University, and he decided to go to Berkeley in Boston, and I decided to study art in St. Louis. But when I went to visit him in his dorm at Berkeley, the performance that really sticks out as changing my life was when one of his co-eds, they had co-ed floors, and a young woman walked down the hallway and asked if my friend could accompany her on Black Coffee, the standard, the kind of the bluesy jazz standard, and just her singing that song to practice it and the story that it told. First of all, I had never heard it before. Jazz was fairly, pretty new to me, but I think I was taken by her performance of it, the simplicity of just being able to evoke this really intense song from nothing. And I remember getting back to St. Louis and going to Vintage Vinyl, the record store there, and getting Live at Mr. Kelly's by Sarah Vaughan. And so that was like my gateway album to learning, several of the standards I still do today. But that was I didn't have the opportunity. My parents
Sure
took me more to like the symphony to see classical music, so I wasn't really raised on jazz, but that was my first real eye opener. I can do this, and I want to tell that story. And wow, that story was interesting as well. So when I'm choosing the songs, when I discover what songs I'm drawn to sing, they kind of find me. It's really a relatability issue. Can I relate to this song? What about, with, for example, Black Coffee in particular, the bridge, the words of the bridge speak about very outdated gender stereotypes of a woman's place is in the kitchen, a man's place is to go out loving. And I'm just like, okay, we got to shed some light on this, total BS here. So that immediately became part of my repertoire, one of the first songs. Particularly, I think, Sarah Vaughan does sing Black Coffee, so that also kind of hammered that in. But yeah, the songs I choose are ones that I could find myself actually living the story of the message of the song. So there's several songs where I'm like, I can't relate to that. I'm not going to be able to learn the lyrics or really convey the meaning to the audience if I can't believe it myself. So that's kind of what directs my personal songbook. Or songs that I can relate to. I consider my role as a singer as a storyteller. So if I can't tell the story convincingly, I'm not going to do the song.
Yeah, I dig it. Yeah. Well, now that you're, in the Kansas City scene, I'm curious, what do you like the best about the jazz scene here?
Well, I love that it keeps me on my toes. All of my peers are incredible in this jazz scene. I love, as a kind of a newcomer to jazz in general and the Kansas City scene, I'm in this position of watching my friends and learning from my friends because a lot of people have been doing this all of their adult career. It's something that they've wanted from being very young. Watching all the different ways my peers approach playing music, from the actual moment of them playing their instrument or singing to how we convey ourselves, our avatars on social media, and the responsibilities and everything that it takes to get the gig from start to finish. The level of professionalism and planning and organizing, and it's just really interesting to watch how everybody navigates that part of things. Just so much goes into it, not just showing up and singing from 8 to 10. It's so I feel challenged by the scene here to kind of keep me on my toes and keep me doing my best. And you recognize what it takes to grow, and to reach your audience eventually.
That made total sense. And I'm curious, every day you wake up, not only do you get to perform, you get to create art and you get to educate the future on something you love. What is it that you look forward to the most every day when you wake up?
I have a lot of different responsibilities, and I look forward to brightening people's days every day. I recently took a job as a preschool art, music, and movement teacher. And so when you speak about waking up every day now, that's a little bit more relatable, waking up at a very certain time to be there for these students. But I just on Friday was able to share them a video of Max Roach and Abby Lincoln in a quartet. So that what I look forward to every day is this communication of how the arts, whether it be visual art or jazz or music or dancing and literature and all the things, how that can change the course of our day. These children were floored by Abby Lincoln. Abby was like their new hero, and so the power that is contained in the arts, generally speaking, is so great. And I look forward to finding ways to convey that to our youth so they can enjoy it too. We all have very complicated lives facing us. And even when you're 3 years old, it's going to get complicated eventually. And if there's an outlet, if these children know that they can go listen to jazz, or they can make jazz or they can draw as an escape, or just as a way to begin processing this complicated world, that brings me joy. And recognizing people in the audience getting closer together, and I often call it a love nest. Like these songs that I sing oftentimes are so emotional and so loving and engaging that watching people respond to that is what kind of motivates me to keep going, because it's just so fun in the moment. People aren't looking, well, people are probably looking at their phones, but it's a moment to kind of be there now, be here now, and that back to that staycation during every gig feeling like a staycation to me is kind of the motivator.
Especially when I think about kids, I always think about the poet Charles Bukowski said, "We're born geniuses and buried idiots." And and it's true, because when you're young, you're just fledgling. You are really you don't have all those walls up. And my wife will play music for the kids a lot, and she's just whether it's Chris Hazelton with the Boogaloo 7, or I don't know if she did yesterday, but I sent over Joey DiFrancesco because I was quite floored by that. I just spoke to him a year ago, and he just, he'd lost a lot of weight. He was supercharged, and things were kind of heading in a wondrous direction. So, but those things are exposed to the kids, and they're not mainstream. I mean, they don't hear. You would think they would have heard Billie Holiday or Abby Lincoln or someone like that, but I'm amazed at how much these kids don't actually get. Or even this week with Charlie Parker, if you play Bird to kids, it's they're like, who is that? So
and they're
able to
willing to accept it without question.
Yeah,
it's like jazz.
Exactly.
I think if you wait too long and share Mary Had a Little Lamb too often, jazz is going to sound intimidating or unclear, hard to wrap your head around. But it's amazing. I mean, watching a drum solo and watching these children respond to it, because kids love rhythm, kids love to use their bodies to move around, and it was exciting. And so props to your wife for playing great jazz for students as well, because it's a brand new, I'm used to teaching visual art, and that's part of my responsibility, but discovering how intoxicating the jazz music is for these little humans is really inspiring. So we'll probably cover classical music and some other genres. Or we may just stick with jazz, because I can't wait it was just 1 week of school that we've had so far, but being able to explain to students that these heroes grew up in your own hometown, what a legacy to be a part of. So I'm looking forward to we're figuring out how to sit down in a circle and things like that. They're very little, but I just, the purpose of art in our lives is extremely important, and finding a avenue to provide access to young people for those art forms is kind of my MO. That doesn't always, you can't tell that when I'm at a gig singing, and it serves its own purpose during an actual performance as well. So it's that respite that art provides, either in the making of it, the learning about it, or the execution of it. It's all so important and healthy for us to have stuff around us.
So everyone has a perception of you, an idea of who they think you are, your family, your friends, your fans, but ultimately you live your life. Who do you think you are?
That's funny. I mean, I think I'm your 21st century multitasker. I've been through a lot. I've been through things that people are still approaching in their life, which is losing your parents and returning home to kind of give up what is most important to you for your career per se, and then to focus on family. And that has had a huge mark on my identity. For me, it gave me kind of a chaotic spell in my 30s where I wasn't quite sure who I was or what my identity was. I gave up being in upstate New York, and I'm still putting together the pieces, because after my tenure as a caregiver, after my father passed away, it basically rolled right into the pandemic. So I'm still finding the answer to that. I'm trying to navigate what it means to have invested 20, 25 years of your life to painting. And I mean, I have that work to show for it, but like, how does that fit in my life? I'm still fairly new on the scene here, and we all have to figure out our calling, our true calling, and find a balance. If it's several things, to answer your question, I think I'm like I said, a 21st century multitasker that is still working on her identity, even at my mature age. We can't be set in stone so easily. I don't think it's necessarily fair in all the cases. We'll see in a year. That would be easier for me to answer in 1 year. Can I
absolutely
get back to you?
Yeah, no. Yeah, totally. Yeah, absolutely.
I shared like the recording with you and this opportunity to sing at a really great venue, Joe's Cafe, in June. I shared that video with you and that performance with you, and those were such incredible experiences, and having the opportunity to have that recording. But I'm not coming into this with a lifetime of, this is what you do, this is how you upload to Bandcamp and Spotify, and I'm just kind of going through the rotation of, okay, this aspect of my life needs attention, and now this one does, and this one doesn't, and that's what I mean by bandwidth. I've got these professional elements of my career, and now I'm in the learning stage of, okay, now what do you do with that? How do you use this video to your advantage to share what you do with other people? I haven't really had that video I shared was just recently edited down, and it's new to me to have that available to share with people, and it means a lot because that performance in particular was very charmed. It was with longtime collaborators, Dave Black, Deruba Hill, and Ben Wheeler, both the recording and the performance I'm talking about. And how do you honor that, and how do you let that chemistry of us coming together, how do I get that out there further to the people? And that's what I'm working on, both in the recorded versions and the live way. Like, Kansas City has great support of the jazz scene, and one of the things that I'm thinking about is, like, how can I help facilitate my collaborators from St. Louis coming to Kansas City to play? I do long for my St. Louis collaborators. They're dear friends, and we were able to play together for quite some time. So here I'm just still, again, finding my way, playing with lots of different people. But it has helped me recognize how wonderful it feels to play with the same people on special occasions or over and over again. I'm finding my way here, and not necessarily settling into any one group or, concrete collaboration of working with the same people over and over again. It's overwhelming. And when you need to find a substitute every once in a while in this town, it's absolutely impossible. Everybody is booked, and the list is very long of people that you can call, but everybody is busy, because this town is so great like that.
That's a good problem to have, for sure.
Yeah.
Hey, thank you for opening up today. Thanks for giving me a little bit of your time, and good luck with everything. I look forward to catching you live. I really did enjoy the videos.
I do appreciate you reaching out to me.
Thanks for listening and tuning in to another Neon Jazz interview, where we give you a bit of insight into the finest singers and players in St. Louis, Kansas City, and spots all over the world, giving fans all that jazz. Thanks to Jenna for her time, music, and story. If you want to hear more interviews, go to Famous Interviews with Joe Domino on the iTunes Store. Visit neonjazz at youtube.com, and for everything Neon Jazz, go to the neonjazz.blogspot.com. Until next time, enjoy the jazz, my friends.
Who knows? Thank you very much.
Neon Jazz.